This is Larry Culpepper, and if you love college football as much as I do, enough to invent the playoff, you're welcome. Do yourself a favor and subscribe to the Championship Drive podcast in the Listen tab of your ESPN app. App is short for app.
Dan Le Batard.
Texter writes in, yes, Dan, you are the great prophet, shedding light upon the eyes of all of us blind sports sheep, where you are destined to save.
Stugats.
Thank you, blind sheep, for removing the scales from your eyes and recognizing that I am the prophet. Or was that sarcasm?
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Here's your SportsCenter update. Tampa Bay wide receiver Mike Evans sat during the national anthem Sunday because Donald Trump was elected as president of the United States this week. Week 10 concludes tonight. Monday Night Football, Bengals and Giants, 8:30 Eastern on ESPN. And finally, Atlanta Hawks guard Dennis Schroeder's hookah bar racked up 21 health code violations. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. Dominique Foxworth, who hosts NFL Nation on ESPN Radio Sundays from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern, joins us right now in studio to give us the Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, half the cost.
Tweeters pointing out that Carolina's schedule hasn't actually been that hard, and furthermore, the Panthers have lost 4 games by a field goal, all 4 at the buzzer. 1 a miss by Gano, 3 game winners by KC, New Orleans, Tampa Bay. No luck in 2016. They were very good in their one-score games last year. I do think that gets overlooked all the time when we do this merit-based studying of the standings, where we just sometimes you're really lucky and sometimes you're really unlucky. Who do you look at in the sport these days and say, okay, that team is like San Diego feels a little bit like that. San Diego, with injuries and the amount of time they've led this season, they feel like a good team that's been really unlucky.
I don't know. I mean, the truth is no one knows. Like, football is, there's so many variables in a football game, whereas like basketball, soccer, hockey, lacrosse, those are all kind of the same game. And everyone is blocking, tackling, passing, doing all the same things. But in football, it's really made up of a bunch of little games. So like the game that the offensive line and the defensive line is playing is an entirely different game than the corners and the receivers and the quarterback and the safeties. And so there's all this going on and these complex game plans going into this, which is why no one can ever really guess, which is why the segment that you guys do with the celebrity prognosticator is so genius, because it exposes that even the people who know a lot about football, as I do, and can break down the film, there's no way to predict how 1,000 different variables will break in the course of a game.
I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy football the way I've always enjoyed football, but we've said this for years. I have no earthly idea what I'm watching when I watch it. I just don't know. I have no idea what I'm watching on Sundays.
Do you? Because you played, Dominique. Like, so do you in real time, without the study of film,
yes.
In real time, do you know, for example, if the offensive guard is having a good game?
If I'm watching the guard the entire game, then yes. But there's still some things that I can't even understand without the help of watching film. So what the things that I can watch in the game is alignment of players, where the safeties are, splits by the running backs and receivers, and I can predict what type of players are going to happen, and I can see the chess match of how people will adjust to blitzes or how the defenses are going to adjust to taking away the quarterback scramble, these sorts of things. I can pick those things up in game, but even someone like me or someone who's much more versed than I am in football, you don't understand it all until after you watch, because like I mentioned, there are a bunch of different games going on, and you don't know who's winning each matchup. And also, when there are players that are losing or winning matchups, we often just say, oh, he's better. When in actuality, what happens many times is the coaches have not put their players. And so I've been on this Brock Osweiler defending tour, because when I watch the film of what they do, their coaches aren't giving him a great chance to succeed. Despite having all those weapons, they are not setting them up to be
I feel like
successful.
that's what's happening with the Packers offense.
Wait, but hold on a second. Maybe there's a reason they're not giving him a chance to succeed. They're seeing him every day in practice, and maybe the couple of times they've given him a chance to kind of air it out, he hasn't done well.
So I think there's what I'm saying. I'm not saying just let him loose.
Right.
I'm saying run plays. They've run a lot of kind of like 2-man basic route combinations. And when teams play them, because they're afraid of those receivers, teams play them like a lot of 2-man two safeties high and max coverages, and you're not going to beat anybody with that. And I haven't seen them adjust to that or find ways. And another thing that I think is like a problem, a scourge in this league as far as coaches are concerned, is they no longer seem to want to create dilemmas or packages of plays that create dilemmas for specific players. So oftentimes what I see is they'll play action and throw a deep post, which doesn't always make sense, because if you have a good running game, the defense is going to adjust by putting another defender in the box, which puts somebody in the deep middle of the field. And then you're going to run a deep post. The only person who doesn't have run responsibility right there is the safety in the corner. So why run a deep post? What you should be doing is, once you get them to adjust, run a route that's like a deep corner, a deep over, a tight end route. The Falcons ran a great play several weeks ago where they ran a corner route with the fullback from the backfield. And why that's smart is because that's creating a dilemma for the linebackers in D-line. So linebackers in D-line are responsible to stop that run, and they come up hard to stop the run. You have a corner route coming out of the backfield to the fullback, and you see what I'm saying? You're creating a dilemma there, whereas there is no dilemma for the free safety. The free safety has no run responsibility, so why run a post directly into him? So, I'm a former player, so my bias is very clear, but I do get frustrated when I listen to sports radio or watch sports TV, and the default is to blame the players all the time. And it's mostly because people who are talking about it don't know what they're looking at.
Well, it's not just to blame the player. What I've found, the part that exasperates me is it's when there are successes,
right,
it's credit the coach.
Right.
Yes.
All the time I'm watching and – you got to credit offensive line coach, blah-blah-blah. Yeah. It is unusual to me, the amount of leadership.
I mean, Malarkey's a great example of – not Malarkey, I'm sorry. McCarthy is a great example of that, because he's one who's been himself blaming players. Like last year, their problem was Eddie Lacy's too fat. At halftime of a game this year, he said that our receivers can't get open. You have a lot of talent, and these guys are in the NFL. You have all-time great quarterback and NFL quality receivers and decent enough players everywhere else. Like, it's not always their fault.
Their offense seems rudimentary with that quarterback. It doesn't seem like they're doing much to help their receivers get open with the route trees.
But with that said, you're right. But it gets back to, like, we don't really know what we're watching because we're so fixated on the quarterback and the wide receivers. They've got their fourth-string running back in, and their defense has just been – just killed with injuries. I mean, I think 3 or 4 of their original guys who started week 1 of the defense are actually started this past week. So.
And that's when the coaches earn their money, and they have not been doing so. But the difference between talent is not as large as you think. People can succeed. The Patriots are always a good example. They're not all that talented as individuals on offense, and I'm including Tom Brady. Tom Brady's really accurate. That's what he does really well. And Gronk is special. But Gronk is kind of the only person on that offense is special, but somehow they make it happen because they're one of the teams that week to week create a new game plan based on the team that they're facing, and they create offensive and defensive packages that are specific to put players in dilemmas.
The praise is pouring in. Shut this gas bag up. How are you letting Foxworthy,
the comedian,
talk X's and O's? This is hurting my ears. What kind of show is this that you guys are doing? Let's talk about Gronk taking hits from Chancellor last night. Let's talk about that. Dominique gets the show, so he's fully happy to do the show the way that we do the show, but it's always good to have someone in who's got more knowledge than us, which isn't very hard to do. When it comes to, but you did lose the audience.
Oh yeah, this is not what I want to do. You asked me the question. Last time I was on the show, I blew everything up because that's what this show is about. That's who I want to be.
That's okay. We'll get there.
You didn't lose me. I can promise you that.
We'll get there. You guys. I mean, Mike Ryan was eating that up.
Oh,
Mike Ryan was swallowing.
I love the show, man.
Yeah, right. Right. He was giving you football information, hugely informed football information there that went so deep that everyone drowned.
Two things I love. I love to see a guard pull man, and I love Dominic Foxworthy talking sports.
I hate talking sports. So, I do Mike and Mike very often, and I never talk sports on their super sporty show. I talk social, I talk race, I make jokes, I attempt to blow their show up, but their show is more difficult to blow up. but I try to do the same thing that I've done when I've been on this show. But you came in, and you as the head of this,
Really,
you let
to
us
be accountable.
You
Way
let
to
us
be accountable. I
No,
let
he's
the
right.
players
He's
play,
right.
man.
He's right.
I let the
Stu,
players play.
I apologize. I take responsibility.
What happened? Why is their show? Why is Mike and Mike more difficult to blow up? Why is it hard to blow up their show?
Greeny always reins it back in.
Greeny
right?
is a ninja when it comes to moving. It's so impressive because it's something that you take for granted. It's a lot like offensive line play that you don't know when it's happening. And I'm coming in like, oh, I'm going to say this and it's going to really be good. Then somehow before I know it, Greeny's turned me around, got me talking about something different. Next thing I know, I'm all the way back home in D.C. waking up the next morning like, damn, I never did get to ambush Golick with that question I had.
Cha-ching! Cha-ching! Time for some ads.
You lived hard this weekend. That doesn't mean you have to come into work this Monday looking like you haven't slept in 72 hours, looking like Stugatz. That's why you should use the tools from the good folks at Dollar Shave Club. Why? Because we all use it here. Tell them, Gotts.
Yep, and so do 3 million members. And they no longer overpay for a quality morning shave, and new members can get their first month for free. DSC is so much more than just razors, though. Pre- and post-shave formulas, skin protection formulas, killer hairstyling products, and an amazing soap and body wash. The products work amazingly. The service is world-class. And there's no commitment, no hidden fees. Cancel whenever you want. Get your first month free at dollarshaveclub.com/Dan. Just pay shipping. After that, it's just a few bucks. That's dollarshaveclub.com/Dan.
You're listening to the Sweaty Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio. Dan Le Batard.
This actually happened off air. It makes me want to punch Stugatz in the ear.
What?
Stugatz.
Mike Ryan asked me, do we want Dan Marley? And Stugatz's reflex response, just spit at me, was Thunder Dan. And then he realizes in a rare moment of self-awareness just what a dope he is. And he says the next thing that comes out of his mouth is, I can't help myself. Like he's an addict.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugatz on ESPN Radio.
If you missed any of the show, you can listen to all 3 hours of the Dan Le Batard Show on demand in the ESPN app, plus our Miami Only Hour that airs before the show. And now you can subscribe to our Best of Podcast. It's all available in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. Guest on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Loan.
Thank you for listening to us. Minneapolis, ESPN Twin Cities 1500, and on ESPN 590 in Omaha, almost 400 stations nationwide. Dominique Foxworth with us. He's a writer, a contributing writer for The Undefeated, host of NFL Nation on ESPN Radio Sundays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern. So if you want football analysis, they chew it up pretty good after the day's events on Sunday. Mike, why were you asking me during the break, when's the last time I cooked a meal for myself? Why did that conversation come up?
Because Fats and Info just posed the question back here because I think it all stemmed from you casually mentioning that you had a cigar guy.
Weird.
That nobody really called out. And so Chris just wondered aloud, when do you think the last time Dan cooked a meal for himself was? And I theorized that, well, Dan has a really restrictive diet. So my guess is he actually cooks himself a lot of meals.
Hold on a second. Why is it weird that I have a cigar guy?
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. Yep, it's weird. I mean, you purchased the same cigars, and you mentioned to me during the break that you have multiple cigar guys, that you have more than one.
You don't think that's unusual? You think that everyone in America, Joe Schmo, has a cigar guy?
No. Okay. If you're a cigar person, though, you have someone you buy your cigars from. No, I didn't think everyone in America had a cigar
you
guy.
made the face like, is it weird?
Right,
Yes,
right.
it's
No,
weird.
put that up on at Le Batard Show, please, on Twitter. Is it weird that Dan has a cigar guy, that as opposed to buying your cigars all over the place, that you?
Well, the more I think about it, maybe I'm coming off of that a little bit because like lots of people have a weed guy. So if you're in
isn't it the same thing? It's the same thing.
Except cigars are legal. I'm assuming you're smoking legal cigars.
Yes, I am.
Right, but you need to have, that's the point. You need to have a weed guy. It's, at least right now, it's illegal in many states. So you need to have a guy. You can buy cigars in a store, any store.
No, but you can't buy these kinds of cigars
Hey, that's
just
the
at
point.
any store.
That's the point. That you're smoking these kind of cigars is like you're kind of fancy, out of touch guy.
Wait a minute. Those are two different things. Fancy and out of touch are not
Okay,
the
that's
same
not
thing.
fair. You're not out of touch. You're fancy though.
Right. Like fancy.
with
Okay,
all your
I'll
bidets.
take fancy. I've got a bidet, not multiple bidets. I don't have bidets plural.
I sent a text to Pablo after he was making fun of your bidet and told him that I have 3 bidets in my house and not one has been used.
Oh, you've never used the bidets?
I mean, who uses bidets?
Do you know how to use the bidets? Do you know?
It seems pretty straightforward.
It'll change your life, man.
Yeah, you got to use that bidet.
You got to use it, man. You got
Get on
3.
that bidet, literally.
I'm good. Just take a shower. You're good. And what are you doing that you need to be like, baby wipes get the job done? How fresh do you need to be for between like the 12 hours that you're out?
Wait a minute. Do you think you're normal with baby wipes? Fancy out of touch guy? Because I'll tell you right now that
I have kids, so the baby wipes are plentiful.
Okay, but baby wipes, I don't think at Batard Show, Guillermo, put it on the poll. Do you use baby wipes? Yes or no? I'm guessing the majority of audience says no.
Baby wipes, I mean, the bidet is a lot more cost-effective, guys.
It's not as efficient time-wise.
The bidet?
Yeah.
Pretty efficient,
It takes 2 seconds.
Yeah,
You gotta get up.
Take it from someone who visits his bidet quite regularly. It's not very time-consuming.
You have an all-in-one, like a toilet and bidet?
No. Come on.
So you
man.
get up.
Separate place.
You get up. Right.
Yeah,
so
you
you
don't really
get up from
you just kind of shuffle
the
over.
toilet.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
you shuffle over.
It's more of a shuffle.
Yeah, that's too much. I got things to do. I got 3 kids, man.
How far away is your bidet?
I got
a big
things
bathroom.
to do. But
I got things to do, baby.
He's a cornerback. I would think he shuffles quickly, but still, I've got things to do. You've got 3 bidets in your house, and you've never used one of them?
No, and I don't think that's absurd. Like, whoever built the house was they have all these fancy European appliances that when they break, it takes us forever to find and fix them, and they were probably fancy Europeans. I'm just a regular dude who just happened to run fast enough to be able to afford a fancy house.
Guillermo, put it up on the poll, please, at Batard Show, because Dominique doesn't think it's absurd. Is it absurd that Dominique has 3 bidets in his house and has never used one of them? Just yes or no. Is it absurd?
Well, it's not my house. I mean, my wife picked it out. I just paid for it.
Right.
So I would have not bought a house with bidets in it because I don't need bidets. But we have them. No one uses them.
But did you do the walkthrough? Like, did you have any? Like, were you looking at the houses with her?
Oh no, I did. I did the walkthrough as you're supposed to, and I
Right.
pretended like I was interested, but not. You don't have a strong opinion. You have to have enough opinion so that she knows that you care, but not too strong opinion. So
I'm familiar with marriage.
Yeah, too strong
I think he was explaining that to me.
I'm explaining today.
Does your wife use the bidet, or the bidets go strictly unused?
I believe the bidets are dry. We got dry bidets in the crib.
So you don't even know if they work.
They do work. Well, they worked when we bought the house because that was all as part of its inspection.
So now rusty water would come out of them because the pipes haven't been used in so long, which defeats the purpose.
Well, I have heard a horror story of a gentleman who was on a date and went to try to clean a bidet and splashed him in the face.
Right
so
in the face.
I'm terrified of bidets.
You think it's self-explanatory, so did I. I thought it was self-explanatory too until I started fiddling around.
No, don't put your face by it.
Well, that's true. That was.
Right.
I mean, that's.
Don't look down the barrel.
It's
man.
one of the dumbest things I've ever done. If you think that one through, the idea that I got sprayed from a fountain of spray. What was the sound that made Mike? What was the?
Oh no!
We were.
You're gonna bring this back.
Well, I need to bring it back.
was
I need
2
to bring,
hours ago.
I know, but I thought.
Splash.
Yeah. Right in my face.
Splash.
Was it a selling point, like the realtor? I'm guessing bidet is a big selling point. When you were walking, checking out the
No,
apartment.
I'm like him. The last apartment I had a bidet, and I never once used it. In fact, the only reason I used this bidet is because Pablo came over to the house and was like, "You have one of those?" And I'm like, "I've never used it. I don't know what you're talking about." And then Pablo just guilted me into it, and then we did it together.
Give me more of the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio. Don Le Batard.
Jeff Van Gundy looked like the guy at the gym who pees out of the bottom of his shorts.
Stugats.
Is that a wrong thing?
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here's your SportsCenter update. Tampa Bay wide receiver Mike Evans sat during the national anthem Sunday because Donald Trump was elected as president of the United States this past week. Week 10 concludes tonight. Monday Night Football, Bengals and Giants, 8:30 Eastern on ESPN. Love the G-Men. And finally, Dungeons and Dragons, Fisher-Price's Little People, and The Swing. Wow, shocking. Have been inducted to the National Toy Hall of Fame. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
The Swing is shocking to you?
Yeah, that and, well, Fisher-Price's Little People also fairly shocking to me. Yeah.
Didn't we deduce, or weren't we told the Stick is also in the Toy Hall of Fame? The Stick?
The Stick is.
Didn't we get into a raging argument with that, the guy who runs, the curator for the Toy Hall of Fame?
We did, yes. We did. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, that's easy. That's first ballot Hall of Fame. I mean, Fisher-Price's Little People? I don't know.
I have kids, small kids, who play with lots of toys, and they don't play with the Stick. So I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, the Stick is more than just a toy. It's a tool. It's a lot of things. It was once alive, which is kind of weird when you think about it also.
Yes, it's rare in terms of the Toy Hall of Fame as having been something that was once alive.
But is the Swing a toy? Feels like a ride.
Well, the reason I brought up a Stick is if the Stick is a toy, then the Swing is a toy.
Absolutely. If the Stick is a toy, Swing's a toy. I think the Swing is a toy. Like you derive some pleasure from it. Its only purpose is for play. I think the Swing is a toy.
Are there any sex toys in the Toy Hall of Fame, or is it just toys?
I could answer this without even looking it up. I'm going to say that's a hard no. Well, phrasing.
At Le Batard Show is where you vote on all of our polls. You did walk into that one. What are you pointing at, Stugotz, with one of your sausage fingers?
Polls.
Yeah.
At Le Batard Show, we will update our polls in just a second. Dominic Foxworth with us here on ESPN Radio. What do you make of Mike Evans sitting because Trump was elected?
I mean, I appreciate it. I'm one who's been in support of Kaepernick, and everyone, or a lot of people, criticize and say that he's not really enacting any sort of change. But I think that you underestimate how important it is to create these discussions. And I know people feel like discussion is not progress, but it is putting it in the public zeitgeist, in our youth. It's impacting the way I think these guys are taking a position that so clearly says that they have responsibility for protecting the society that they think we deserve to bleed, that we deserve to create. And I think that's something that young people feel, it's something that adults feel, and it causes us all to be more active and more aware of each other, hopefully. So I'm in favor of it. If that's how he feels, that's how that's what he should do. And I also have to try to be aware of my own personal biases, because had someone done this to President Obama when he was first elected, I'm pretty sure I'd be furious. I would try to, and
I don't love this.
Yeah,
I don't love what Mike Evans is doing, not just because it's copycatting, because it feels to me like it's diluting. What Colin Kaepernick was doing was actually original. Now, what? Anytime
anything happens,
that anything in politics happens that you disagree with, even understanding what the starting point is on his disagreement, it feels like a diluted version of the same thing.
I mean, that's kind of unfair to say that you are required not only to have a political stance, but you also must be creative. Like,
well, it's what I want from my celebration, so it's what I want from my protest too.
Agreed. But I agree that that's a valid argument, in that it does draw some attention away from Colin Kaepernick. But I think if it's something that you believe in, I don't think that you need to go home and draw up a better, new, more original way to protest. It's something that he believes in. I'm on board with him. I think that it's unfortunate because acts like that turn off the other side, which is which is terrible. And I said that I need to be more conscious of my own biases. So one thing that I remember when the riots, I guess, in air quotes, happened in Baltimore after Freddie Gray, I was in Boston, and I remember I'm from Baltimore, so watching it on TV, I remember listening to the newscasters talk about how foolish it was for the rioters to, like, burn down their own CVS. And I was kind of enraged because if you truly believe that all men and women are created equal, then you must also believe that there is a confluence of events that would lead you to behave in such a crazy way. And you have to understand that the same thing is true. That's an act of desperation. When you have no other help, you have no other choice, you're desperate.
It's a cry for help.
So I'm trying my best, though it's hard, to think of the people who have voted for Trump, despite all the things that he said and done. They are in a position where they feel so desperate. Like, how desperate must you feel to make that decision? So I'm trying to apply some empathy. It's tough because it's a feeling that, like, black people and minorities often feel like they're required to assimilate. They're required to understand the other side. And so I'm not out here preaching, like, give them a chance to everyone, because I know that that's a hard thing to do. But for myself personally, I'm trying my very best.
It's well put. That's a good way to do it.
Understand what could cause somebody to feel that desperate. And I mean, I have theories on that, but I won't hijack.
To look past all the things he said.
It's a little late for that.
To look past all the things he said and still go to the booth and vote for him.
Yeah.
Well, but that's interesting. I had not heard that espoused, especially coming from the viewpoint that he comes from. I had not heard the idea of trying to extend what is happening. The same thing, right? If people are rioting and burning down their neighborhood, it's a cry for help. And in here, there might be a cry for help, although I find it harder to recognize.
I mean, I think the best way I can say is, like, the world was turned upside down on these people. So it's a lot of working class people who grew up in a world where their fathers and mothers could provide for them with just a high school education. And they thought they could do the same thing, a decent middle class lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, they're adults and their jobs are gone because of technology and trade deals. And the technology and the trade deals are examples that are like Pareto optimal outcomes for our society. So there's an overall good from that for our society, but disproportionately that wealth is going to one area, which is that. I mean, I can understand that would frustrate me because it's not fair. A lot of them grew up in situations, again, where their parents had nothing but a high school education, and they did not have the access to these things.
That's why I liked Hell or High Water so much as a movie, because it was a movie about bank robbers, but it was also a movie about the banks robbing the bank robbers, and the idea of poverty as a generational cycle that gets handed down, right, like a disease, like a family disease that you can't escape from. But one of the things that I find amazing, we talked about this last week, the idea of Trump as the model for the working class, or the symbol for the working class, is laugh out loud funny if created. Keep in mind, Warren Buffett has vastly more in common with the working class than Donald Trump does. Warren Buffett's second wealthiest man in the world now that, the Mexican peso has gone right into the toilet.
But I don't think, kind of to Dominique's point, it's how you deliver the message to the working class. They didn't really care who was delivering that message. Right. They were that desperate that they just wanted someone who was going to...
Somebody to deliver the message.
Yes.
I heard an analogy on NPR Politics podcast a couple of days ago about, they said that Trump was like a pop song, and that when you first hear it, at least for these people, when you first hear it, it sounds good because it's poppy and it's catchy. But then when you actually listen to the words, you're like, what are they even talking about? This doesn't make any sense, but it's too late. It's already caught you. And I think that's what happened for a lot of those people. That was a perfect analogy, because it's like they heard those messages, and as racist and xenophobic as some of them are, that speaks to people. And unfortunately, that is like a vestigial instinct in many of us to be tribal in that way. And we can pretend like we're going to live in some utopian society someday where we don't see color or we don't see race, but that's not an actuality. When things aren't going well for you, you want to blame the others. And often the others, in this case, the others should be the elite in the country, but instead it's a lot easier to blame the others, who are the blacks and browns and females and and those sorts of things. So it's very, very discouraging. But I think that empathy to me, it's like a long endurance race that there is no prize at the end. It's very lonely. It's very difficult, but you're better off having tried to push yourself through the discomfort that happens when you're kind of trying to learn someone else's perspective.
You care that Mike Evans didn't vote?
No, I don't. I've heard the Stephen A. stuff, and I heard that live. Actually, one of the guys in our office plays that all the time because he used to work there. And at the time, I was really offended by what Stephen A. was saying. Like, it just that type of stuff doesn't. I don't know. It seems like you're looking for something to discredit someone who may or may not have a valid opinion. You can't take one action. I could find one action in everyone's life. If we were to define everybody by their worst action, then no one would have anything. No one would have any credibility to say anything ever.
Give me more of the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio.
Start your day with Barbasol Shaving Cream, America's leader for a close, comfortable shave.
Dan Le Batard.
There are some legitimately meaty race stories out there.
Stugats.
Great.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugats on ESPN Radio.
With all the chaos and stress that Thanksgiving can bring, surprise your loved one by sending a beautiful 1-800-Flowers bouquet of 24 multicolored roses for just $24. Go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN. Hurry. The offer ends on Friday.
Texter writes in here, Foxworthy needs to be in studio with you guys. Get on that, Mike. See if you can make that happen one day. Dominique Foxworth with us on ESPN Radio. Going to update our polls here in just a second. Stugats, what do you got? You could tweet us at any point at Le Batard Show. What are the polls revealing right now?
Did you notice that Greg Gumbel was getting names wrong yesterday? 52% of the audience said no. Should Dan explain it? 51% of the audience said no. Is that the most interesting thing Russell Wilson has ever said? 66% of the audience said yes.
What he said was that some sort of corporate-sponsored vitamin water helped him with concussions.
At 66% of our audience think that's the most interesting thing he's ever said, and I think they're right. Do you know the origins of why someone would pin their ears back? 75% of the audience said no. Is it weird that Dan has a cigar guy? 56% of the audience said no. Not weird. Do you use baby wipes? 51% of the audience said no. 51% of the audience making a big mistake. Is it absurd that Dominique Foxworth has 3 bidets in his house and has never used any of them? 72% of the audience says yes.
Interesting. I was fancy out of touch guy. Old baby wipes over here. Baby wipes elitist with the bidets that he doesn't use. It appears he's out of touch. I'm a man of the people.
I'm completely comfortable with the country that elected Donald Trump to not agree with me. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
You have a cigar guy, a bidet, and a waterfall in your house. Man of the people you are not.
Not a waterfall.
Oh, what is it?
It's a water wall.
Oh, sorry.
My waterfall's in my backyard.
Sounds like your wife got a nice place. One of the things that people might not know about Dominique, one of the interesting things I learned after meeting him is he walked out of, and I'm always telling you this, Stugats, because we lend this merit all the time to rich people as if they came upon their wealth through noble, meritorious means. Dominique, while negotiating with Jerry Jones as part of the players' union, came away from that meeting saying, these people are not smarter than I am. Came away from the negotiations. Why are they always winning the negotiations when we've got America's most popular sport? They're not smarter than me.
It's interesting. So why are they always winning the negotiation?
No, I think that oftentimes we complicate or we simplify a complicated process, which is the negotiations. Last time I was on, we talked a little bit about how difficult it is to take a guy. So if you have one guy who's sacrificed from the time that he was 8 years old to get to the NFL, sacrifice opportunities for education, sacrifice his body to get to the NFL, and now he's here. And only thing that's standing between him and getting the dream of playing in the NFL and getting the money that comes with playing in the NFL is a CBA. And that CBA, we're arguing over whether there's going to be a percentage point here or percentage points there, or we're arguing over how much power Roger Goodell could have. While the percentage point is a lot, it means nothing to that player who is already under contract. So when you think about it that way, and you also think about the fact that the owners have a tremendous amount of leverage in every arena. Like people say millionaires versus billionaires, but millionaire versus billionaire is not a fair matchup. I think that both of those numbers are far away from the American people, so they just think, oh, it's all rich. But it's not a fair matchup. They can withstand those an extended work stoppage longer than players can. So then you get down to like decision-making time. It's the 11th hour, and it's like, all right, are we going to hold out for another percentage point? That may translate to $100,000 more per player, or we're going to hold out for a commissioner discipline for all the players. None of them believe that they're ever going to be the one who face commissioner discipline, or are we going to go play and make this money? And I mean, it's very difficult to create leverage in those environments. I think we were creative and to find legal ways to create leverage, to create a lockout insurance policy that hadn't been done before. We created a lot of leverage and got things out of the deal that we were very happy with. But I think in actuality, at the end of the day, there are questions in my mind for like, what is the purpose for a modern sports union now?
Well, beyond, we don't have time to get to that in the next 2 minutes. Were you surprised sitting down to negotiate that contract? Was it a source of discovery for you to leave that room and be like, oh, these guys are not smarter than
Absolutely.
I am?
So like I had I'd always kind of been interested in business, and after I went there, that was when I decided that I would apply to the best business schools in the country, because I had walked out, and I think it's human nature. We ascribe these intellect to people based on how much they've been able to accumulate, when in actuality there's a lot more serendipity and hard work. So I'm not saying that they aren't deserving of some of the things that they've had. They've worked hard, but it's not because that they are just better. They've had a lot of opportunities and a lot of luck to get them in the position that they are. And the guys that I grew up with are just as smart. And we often, I think, get confused about the difference between intelligence and knowledge. It's like, if you know a bunch of stuff and you can like quote Greek philosophy, we often think that you're smart. It doesn't mean you're smart. That means that you remember a bunch of stuff. I think being able to evaluate and analyze things in the ways in a fast way, the way that football players do on the field.
Well, that's what's interesting to me, that most athletes, Gronk, hard as this is for me to say, is a genius. Like you can't really do all of those things that he does, that these people who have reached the top 1% of the top 1%, it's just a different way of measuring intellect, but it doesn't mean that it's not intellectual.
I agree.
But I don't think most people do. I think most people think that that in every way, owners are smarter than players.
Yeah,
they aren't. I mean, I'm here to tell you that they aren't. They aren't. And I think that we can watch some of the. I've been obviously an adversary of Roger Goodell's many times, but I actually have been weirdly protecting him and defending him as of late, because when you think about the job that he has to do, there are 31 billionaires who get what they want all the time and have different views. They're all yelling at him to give him what they want. Right. And somehow he's managed to keep this thing afloat. I think that if he wants to...
They're terrible teammates, too.
They are.
They
are. He has to get to a point where I think David Stern and Paul Tagliabue and Adam Silver may be that they are getting to a point where he can manipulate them into the things that they want to do and to be able to control the process, which he's not there yet.
I'm wondering, the owner, you walked in and you thought to yourself, man, he's really smart, and like 10 seconds in, you're like, no, that guy ain't smart. Just one name.
I can't give you one. I can give you the name. So Clark Hunt. I was surprised by him because I thought he was very smart.
We'll have Dominique in with us again. Our thanks to Dominique Foxworth for spending the last hour of the show with us. It was fun. Talk to you tomorrow.
We will talk to you mañana. This was the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN.
Hey everyone, this is Rachel Younggu from the ESPN Esports Podcast. Is Overwatch the next big esport? How much has BlizzCon changed over the past few years? We break it all down on this week's podcast. Be sure to tune in.
Scott Burnside, ESPN.com here on the latest edition of Hockey Today, the podcast. We hear from Henrik Lundqvist of the New York Rangers. Trevor Daley of the Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins stops by. And so does Charlie Coyle of the Minnesota Wild.
Louisville heads to Houston to face a dangerous Cougar team on Thursday night.
47 yards right up the middle.
Coverage begins at 7 Eastern on ESPN and on ESPN Radio. Presented by Dr. Pepper.